Hello, story lovers! Welcome to Nana's Fairy Tales, where we share amazing and interesting stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to get notified when we upload another enchanting tale.
There was a village which lived in absolute peace and harmony. They begin their days by thanking their chief for making them see a brand new day, then head to their farms to cultivate. Some of them were hunters, killing animals in the forest and supplying the villagers with enough meat. The village lived in health and prospered, but something happened and the narrative changed. Flood came one season and made away with all their crops and farm animals. Some people lost their lives in the process. Parents lost their kids, and some kids never saw their parents again. There was so much chaos in the village. When the flood subsided, the survivors were faced with extreme poverty and hunger. The children became sick out of poor nutrition, and their parents panicked. Couples do have quite a number of children in their community because of the affordable cost of living in the community. But when the famine came, they couldn't bear it anymore. Parents began to give their children away in exchange for baskets of food. The richest people in the community that were not too swept off their feet by the flood began to give out foods to the poor in exchange of a child or children, depending on the negotiations. This was the beginning of slavery in this community. It became a norm that parents who feel that they can't take care of their children sold some of them in order to cater for the rest. The healthy children were sold to these slave masters who used them as maids and servants in their homes or as laborers in their farms. And so, there was a class division in this society. The people discriminated against the slaves. Anyone bought in exchange for money or goods became a second-class citizen and a low life. And as long as they were once slaves, all the children that would ever be produced in that lineage were regarded as slaves. It got so worse and intense that when an influential man dies, men with well-built bodies in the slave market would be bought and buried alive with the deceased. This brought so many evil in the society. People began to kidnap other people's children and sell as slaves. Others go to a faraway land, kidnap young women and highly exploit them. They keep them in a room, force men on them and get them pregnant. They sold their babies once they give birth. This became a business, and the village had the first slave market in the history of Africa. So many men from all other African communities came to this village to buy slaves. Slavery became a very lucrative business, the business of the extremely rich and diabolic men. Decades after the famine that brought about the issue of slavery, there was still slavery. It became a culture. It became a norm. The slaves were segregated and pushed to one tiny region in the village. They inhabited there and identified as the slaves in the community. The other class of people in the community didn't want to marry them. They never associated with them in any way. They made their living by working on the farms of the free, as they were widely called. Some of these female slaves were taken to a place where they are used as toys by male visitors. They were raped, molested, and battered. An enslaved man became a faceless and nameless man. His only name was a slave. Their children were sold as mere properties by their owners, and their wives were constantly raped right in front of them. They were used, drained, and powerless. One season, a man named Ejike, one of the enslaved, rose and called all the other slaves. He began to address them. He said, "These people are our brothers, but they have turned us to objects of ridicule. They manipulate our minds and make us believe that we are nothing but mere pieces of furniture beasts of burden, and low-life primates that they can enslave, exploit, use, and do away with. They have chained our hands, but they haven't chained our minds. This slavery is a mindset. If we refuse to be slaves, no one can make us slaves. The people looked on at him in wonder and amazement. For once, they began to realize that it's just a game of the mind. They began to plan a revolt. Ejike mobilized the young men and kept them on standby, ready for war. He taught them resistance, reminding them that they have a say in whatever happens in their lives, and that is why they are humans. The revolts began, and the slaves refused to work for their masters without pay. When forced to work, their slogan became, "I'd rather die than be a slave." The slave masters became worried and terrified, because a slave lost is penny lost. The ones they once controlled now stands up to them. The slaves united themselves and began to work on their farms in the region that was allocated to them. They farmed together, produced and processed their foods together, and together was building their broken lives and community. Slaves in other villages heard what was happening and began to prepare their own revolts. Because they were used to hard jobs, most of them were extremely strong and hardworking. They farmed in large quantities, this time not for anyone, but for themselves. They built the biggest market in the community, and people from all parts of the place came to buy food from them. The community which once enslaved them became scared of their growth and prosperity. They became scared that they might turn around to work for them, for they prospered greatly. They gathered themselves to fight the slaves and chase them far from their land, but the slaves were 10 times ahead of them. They knew that the day would definitely come when they would be asked to leave the community, so they prepared for that day. As the people of the community were raising their army, the slaves on their end was raising an army too. Ejike told them to always be on the watch and look out for their enemies. Their enemies were drawing closer to their territory, and they kept their eyes on them. The enemies camped very close to them, waiting to attack, but the slaves had already placed themselves in perfect positions, and before their enemies could raise a finger, they've killed 80% of them, and the rest fled. With this, no one ever threatened or bothered the slaves again. They lived and prospered, but there was something you could never erase: the name, the face, and the identity. Even though they were no longer slaves, they suffered a lot of humiliation, discrimination, and segregation. For once a slave, always a slave. And so, there was a people. Thank you for listening to this amazing story. I hope you enjoyed every bit of it. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to get notified when we upload another enchanting tale. Till then, catch you.